Hello everyone, this is Natura Agani, a senior teaching assistant at University of Pristina, Faculty of Philosophy, the Department of Psychology, and I have been invited by Dr. Follow to give a presentation on my study, which looked into children's exposure to peer victimization, bullying, perception of school safety, and school violence among Albanian and Serbian students in Kosovo. So before going on into the details of the study, I would briefly like you to give an introduction about why this study is important and what does literature say about it. It has been mentioned in a few studies that schools play a crucial role in promoting children's psychological development, and as such, they represent a microcosm of the society in which children find themselves, while incidents of violence and peer victimization disrupt the purpose of education and, as a result, have an impact on psychological development of the children. Although schools have been found to be the safest places for youth for over a decade now, and especially in US, however, numerous researchers have documented that a substantial number of youth are victimized and bullied in school. Specifically, there has been found a link between these experiences on their cognition, social, psychological, and emotional well-being, including educational outcomes. Uh, so Kosovo is no exception when it comes to the interest in knowing more about this topic. And as a result, in the post-war period, the topics of peer victimization, bullying, and children perception of school safety and school climate especially have taken a special place in public discourse and research field, both at national and international level. Although research is lacking in Kosovo, available findings indicate that a significant number of Kosovar children experience school violence, peer victimization, and bullying within school context. And these are only a few studies who have used a more structured research methodology that looked into these variables. The Agani 2010 is a pilot study which I've conducted with both Albanian and Serbian students, while the study of UNICEF is among the first ones to look into this phenomenon. However, the study conducted by Kelmendi Arandio and Seni Durako are also colleagues of my department. However, all these studies only provided prevalence estimations and form of aggressions explored, without not looking into more details on how they relate to each other, what is the moderation or other implications of these variables. So I would only go through very briefly on how we measured the main variables of the study. So we use the definition provided by Forlong and Morrison on school violence, which involves both criminal acts and aggression in school, which inhibits development and learning and harms the school climate. For bullying, of course, we use the work of Alveus, with whom I had the chance to meet and work a little bit while I was studied at Clemson University for my graduate school. However, we took into consideration the definition provided by CDC, which sort of combines the original definition of Albeus and a more recent comprehensive definition provided by CDC. So bullying is an observed or perceived power imbalance, or is repeated multiple times, or it is likely to be repeated. This behavior may inflict harm or distress on the person being bullied, including physical, psychological, social, or educational harm. Peer victimization was defined as a situation in which someone is the target of frequent aggressive behaviors by peers and does not explicitly assume a power imbalance between perpetrators and victims, or plural in this case. School safety refers to any threat to a student's well-being that could be self-inflicted or imposed by others, while school climate is based on patterns of people experiences of school life and reflects norms, goals, and values, interpersonal relationship, teaching and learning practices, as well as organizational structures. So this next slide illustrates the association among the variables of the study, and you can see those depicted by red arrows, which are here, these like red arrows. Uh, and then group differences based on demographic variables are depicted by blue, more like dark blue arrows. And then predicted moderation effect, which is this one here, and students' perception of school climate. So by exploring these research questions and hypotheses, which will be more elaborated in others in like next slides, this study aims to fill important gaps in the literature regarding children exposure to peer victimization, exposure to school violence, bullying, and their perception of school safety and school climate in general, and then in particular for like Kosovo. So this study used 5 main measures, and first was family affluence scale, which looked into measuring socioeconomic status of the sample. However, when doing psychometric properties of the scale, it showed that it had very low reliability, which was below 0.5. So as a result, this scale was excluded from analysis due to very low reliability level. The next measure looked at multidimensional peer victimization scale, and I would just like to give me a second so I can go into more detail about what it actually measured. Uh, just a second, please. Okay, so multidimensional peer victimization scale had 16 questions and included 4 subscales, which measured or which looked into physical victimization, verbal victimization, social manipulation, and attack on property. So the overall reliability of the scale was satisfactory. The following measure was perception of school climate, and this is a 15 item scale which looks into 2 factors of school climate. The first one is the disciplinary structure, while the second one is the student support. This scale also reported to have good reliability. The following measure was general impressions of school safety, and these were general questions about their impression of school safety and included 8 items. And they also looked at the other like specific locations within schools, such as bathroom or locker rooms, that were included. Then we use the Alveus bullying questionnaire, and this has 2 dimensions of it. One is about being bullied, and the other one is about bullying others. So it's like is a victim and perpetration as well. So both these like measures reported to have good reliability of the scale. So let's slowly get into like our findings of this study. So this is a study which included 385 students, from which 56% were Albanians and 44% belonged to Serbian. The mean age was about 13 years old, and these included children from grade 6 to 9, respectively from being 11 years old to 16 years old. It's important to highlight that this study had very good response rate of 86%, and prior to collecting the data, it went through the IRB process, which was received from Clemson University, and then it was carried out in 2 Albanian schools and 2 Serbian schools. So first, we wanted just to look how participants responded to the global questions about being bullied and also bullying others. And we did some comparisons because it was important for us to get more information about prevalence of bullying. And so in this study, it was showed that more, more than half of children did not experience bullying in school. However, 14% of them reported that it happened 2 to 3 times, 7% 2 or 3 times a month, and 2% once a week, and 5% reported several times. The study conducted in 2010 on the same questions reported that children that 6% of students responded it happened 2 or 3 times. So it means like that over a 9-year period, this number was almost more than doubled when addressing this question. We also look at prevalence of bullying others at school. It was found that 9% had bullied another student 2 or 3 times, while the study conducted in 2010 on the global questions about bullying others in the past couple of months documented that 3% responded it happened 2 or 3 times a month or more. So this gives us an idea about the prevalence that this phenomenon has within our society, in particular within school context. Although the number of years in between for 2 studies is quite long in order to come to an estimation and to jump into conclusion. But it gives a perspective on how is the prevalence of bullying in schools. So if you remembered my theory or like my model, the first important exploration was to look at how these like main variables are related to gender, grade, and ethnicity. I would just like to remind you that we also had the socioeconomic status, but due to very low levels of alphas reported, it was excluded from analysis. So I would just go briefly to discussing just a little bit like what does this table actually means. It is important to first highlight that this study confirmed that in Kosovo schools, children are victimized by peers. And so, contrary to findings reported in US and in European literature, particularly in a study conducted by one of my colleagues in 2001, it was found that male participants reported higher levels of victimizations when compared to female participants. However, this study found no gender differences in students' reports of peer victimization, including all those 3 dimensions, which were physical victimization, verbal victimization, and social manipulation. Rather, it was found that both boys and girls experienced victimization at several rates within school context. When it comes to peer victimization and grade levels, findings from studies conducted particularly in Balkan region have documented that children from lower grades experience more forms of peer victimization when compared to children from upper grades. However, contrary to findings from the literature, this study found no statistically significant differences in rates of peer victimization for youth in different grades. Interestingly, peer victimization, uh, or before going into that, this study was especially innovative in exploring ethnicity and experiences of peer victimization, since this relationship had not been previously explored in other studies, including the region. So, findings from the study reveal that Albanian children are significantly more likely to experience peer victimization when compared to their Serbian peers. And when I go into discussion, I would like to elaborate a little bit more why this is happening actually. Um, so, bullying victimization and gender um, show that there is no significance for experiences bullying, but there was significance in perpetration bullying, especially for boys. And this study found the study conducted in 2010 also found similar rates that boys perpetrate bullying more than girls. When it comes to bullying and experiencing bullying, it was significant for lower grades, especially grades 6 and 7, but there was no significance for perpetration of bullying and grade level. Um, Bullying victimization and ethnicity. As mentioned earlier, this study was quite innovative when it comes to this variable. This study found that Albanian children in Kosovo schools were more likely to experience bullying than Serbian children. And this finding was also supported by the previous study conducted in 2010. There might be several reasons attributed to these findings. First, it should be taken into consideration the locations of school for Albanian and Serbian participants. For example, Albanian schools were in urban areas, while Serbian schools were in rural areas. I recall that during administration of the questionnaires, discrepancies in sizes of the class were observed. For example, Albanian classes were much more crowded, on average about 25 children per class, while the Serbian classes had on average less than 20 children per class. And then it can be argued that children who are part of smaller classes are more likely to have better relationship with their peers compared to children in more crowded classes, in this case, the Albanian children. Also, teachers in smaller classes may also be better able to prevent bullying, as they may have able to get to know their students better and also have more effective supervision among them. Um, Finally, it is possible that Serbian children have more social cohesion due to the need for a collective resistance in the situation where the Serbian community perceives substantial loss from its pre-war status of privileged ethnic community. So these arguments presented might provide a new perspective on why we have these differences, particularly when it comes to ethnicity. Differences in perceptions of school safety in relation to gender, grade, and ethnicity showed no significance, while perceptions of school safety, uh, disciplinary structure was significant for both genders. Student support was also for both gender. School climate and hold on, and grade. Okay. Uh, Findings in general from literature have documented that students' age is negatively associated with students' positive perception of school findings. However, this study found that children from higher grades were more likely to report positive disciplinary structure and perception of support when compared to lower grades. However, it is a little unclear why this different pattern of results was found, but it might be argued, and from what I've observed, that children from higher grades are more likely to be subject to authoritative teaching, which has in the literature been found to have positive correlations with engagement, academic achievement, and lower rates of misbehavior and peer victimization as well. There was no significance for perception of school climate and ethnicity. It was expected to have a correlation. One potential explanation might be the continual support from the international community that the Albanian educational system receives from school infrastructure and training of school staff in the post-war period. Although similar supports were offered to Serbian schools as well, the general perception among the Serbian has overshadowed these efforts, which have contributed to lower disciplinary structure and less student support in Serbian schools. However, this relationship should be further explored and maybe be explored by different measures as well. Okay, so the following hypothesis looked among associations among peer victimization, bullying, school safety, and school climate. Peer victimization and bullying, it was found that there was significant positive association between peer victimization and bullying. However, contrary to expectations, significant positive associations were observed between bullying others and peer victimization, as well as bullying others and bullying victimization. Also, this was quite contradictory from what originally was hypothesized. Literature shows that children who bully and also are bullied by others have been found to have higher rates of aggression than children who were not involved in bullying in general. I was also interested in looking at bullying others and school climate. It was showed that negative association between bullying others and perception of school climate, and this is consistent with findings from literature. Also, bullying others were not significantly associated with perception of school safety, which can be argued that increased power that perpetrators of bullying possess might make them feel safer at school when compared to the other group. Peer victimization, bullying, and school safety. Just a second, so I get to the slide. Okay. Significant positive associations between peer victimization and bullying victimization were reported, and this is consistent with findings from literature. Both peer victimization and bullying victimizations were negatively associated with school climate and perception of school safety. A couple of authors documented that perception of school safety increased when students reported positive students and teacher relationship, and also components of student support and disciplinary structure were found to predict children's perceptions of school safety. And finally, the moderating role of bullying victimization by school climate and school safety was explored. Perceptions of school safety was significantly negatively associated with bullying victimization, while school climate was also found to be negatively associated with experiences of bullying. When looking into demographic variables, it showed no prediction for bullying victimization. Further, a significant amount of variance was found for experiencing bullying by suggesting that greater disciplinary structure and student support serves as a moderator between experiencing bullying and perception of school safety while controlling for demographic variables. So actually, when the climate of a school is very positive, students who are bullied feel that they have a safe environment for reporting victimization, and on the contrary, when the climate is negative, bullied students feel particularly at risk. Okay, so this study has a couple of strengths which I would like to share with you. This study is among the first that responded to the very limited research on children's experiences of peer victimization, bullying, perception of school climate, and school safety in Kosovo schools, with particular focus on exploring similarities and differences in the prevalence and forms of the above mentioned variables. Uh, Exploring um, and it's also innovative in examining the variable of ethnicity, as no previous studies examined particularly this variable. Despite the strengths mentioned, there are several limitations to this study. First, a convenient sample. Findings are relevant only to those 4 participating schools and cannot be generalized for the whole sample of children in Kosovo. Second, as some authors have recognized, there are cultural differences regarding conceptualization and definitions of bullying and peer victimization in both Albanian and Serbian languages. For example, I have noticed that peer victimization is often used synonymously with bullying. It is important to mention that Balkan culture in general and Kosovo society in particular is still unfamiliar with the term bullying, and more importantly, we don't have a word on both languages that specifically addresses the bullying. So we are using a term that is quite close to original definition, but it does not encompasses all of the necessary elements that Alveus actually talked about and defined it about. We use self-reported student measures, and although they have been found to be valid and reliable measures, there is still the risk of that. We were not able to test hypotheses, especially when it came to socioeconomic status due to inadequate reliability of the measure. We were not able to include Serbian children that belong to the 9th grade because the educational system in Kosovo is parallel. Kosovar schools follow the Kosovar system, while Serbian schools, although in Kosovo, follow the Serbian system, and the elementary schools ends from until up to grade 8, so they don't have a 9th grade. They go straight to the high school, which goes first year of high school, while the Albanian children have the 9th grade and then have the 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. So these differences in educational system made impossible to have higher number of students from Serbian ethnicity in particular, made impossible to compare children from the 9th grade. And then cross-sectional design to test construct of interest is another limitation. Findings from this study have provided some important information about children's experiences of peer victimization, bullying, perception of school safety, and school climate in Kosovo. Future research should explore this construct across more representative and diverse samples. It is particularly important to include other ethnicities and specifically Roma, Ashkali, Egyptian, and Turks. Future studies should also include grades from elementary school, particularly those from 4th and 5th grade, as findings have emphasized that children in these grades are more likely to experience peer victimization and bullying compared to children from higher grades. More complex and advanced methodological designs should be employed for future studies. Longitudinal studies would be a very good example. However, we all know they are quite expensive, take a lot of time, and there needs to be more human resources to carry them out. Also, qualitative studies is something that I am more interested into, and these qualitative studies or qualitative approach would provide an opportunity to more deeply explore the main construct of the study, particularly from children's viewpoint. And especially when recognizing the limitation of students' self-report data, uh, qualitative studies would be a good example on how to address that. Uh, More research is also needed within the Balkans in general to make the connection between experiences of peer victimization and bullying and also their impact on mental health, physical health, and academic outcomes. I am particularly interested in mental health, as also I am a clinical psychologist, and besides academia, I also work with clients, and this is something that I'm looking into researching in future. School level variables should also be further explored. There were quite few variables that came up during literature review. For example, student-teacher ratio, location of school, size of classes. These should be all explored in relation to peer victimization, bullying, and experiences of school safety. There are quite some implications for practice from these findings. First, the study provides a general description and explanation of phenomena um, for both Albanian and Serbian students in Kosovo. Findings are also important for estimating the prevalence rates of peer victimization, bullying, and perception of school safety. Second, the measures used in this study have been widely used in other international studies, but their application has been limited in Kosovo and in neighboring countries as well. In this regard, this study provided validated instruments with reliable psychometric properties for other researchers in Kosovo and neighboring countries, particularly in Albania, Serbia, and Macedonia, since the questionnaires were translated into Albanian and Serbian and then back translated as well. So researchers in Macedonia, North Macedonia, and Serbia can use them in Serbian, while Kosovo and Albania can also use them in Albanian. Findings from this study may inform the development of local training for teachers and school staff on the prevalence of bullying and peer victimization and the importance of positive school climates. These findings might be also useful for other stakeholders to conduct desk reviews, design research studies, and national reports, as well as organize awareness workshops and campaigns with children and teachers about these main constructs of this study. And here should also be mentioned professionals, mental health professionals, lawmakers, and NGO stakeholders, particularly those who work in child protection. Finally, results from this study may inform the design and implementation of prevention programs for children in Kosovo schools. Specifically, since the current study used the Olveus Bullying Questionnaire or OBQ to measure bullying behaviors in schools, this is a good opportunity to establish working relationship between Kosovo and US, particularly for introducing the Alveus bullying prevention program for Kosovar schools. And as we know from literature, not only this intervention program has been found to be effective in reducing bullying among children and youth, this approach would further strengthen the ties between the research community in Kosovo and the US for continued support in designing and conducting research in Kosovo. Thank you very much. And shall you have any questions about my research? My email is here on the first slide. Thank you.